Hello, this is Professor Datta. When you use RapidMiner, there are various kinds of files that you will use and or will be generated in the course of the analysis. So it helps to know a little bit about the data management capabilities of RapidMiner. They're pretty simple, but it's useful to just focus on them for a little while. So in RapidMiner, the panel, you can see the user interface on the left-hand side of this slide. The panel that's actually associated with managing data in RapidMiner is called the repository, and I've blown up that panel for you on the right-hand side, and that's the one that we'll focus on. Within that panel, I'm going to focus more on the last option, which is local repository, and you will see in a few seconds why that is the case. So with that, let's open up RapidMiner and see how we would use its data management capabilities. So there you are in terms of the RapidMiner user interface. And as I just mentioned, the repository panel that you're seeing here on the left-hand side, I'm just highlighting that for you. This is the panel that is associated with managing data within RapidMiner. And I will be concentrating most on this last option, which says local repository. But a quick word about the first four. These first four links that you see, they connect you to various resources, and these resources include data sources as well as sample programs for different domains. These have been created by either the company itself, which is here the training resources. These are been created by RapidMiner itself. And then of course there is a large user community that has also prepared data and analysis examples for you to learn both the software itself as well as data mining concepts. But for purposes of our course, most of the data that you will use will be, or rather import in order to analyze, will be in the form of Excel spreadsheets or what are called CSV files, comma separated data files, and you will put them, you will organize them in your local repository. So that's the portion that we will focus on. And if I click on local repository, you can see there are subfolders. We will look at those in turn. So let's get started and actually go through a process of importing data. So let's say I want to import some data for analysis. I would do that using the import data button, and from this dialog box I am not going to use the right hand option which is there to enable me to connect with legacy databases through SQL type queries to actually extract data for analysis. In our case, for our course, the data that you will use will probably be on your machine in the form of Excel files or CSV files. So I'll just click on my computer, and I have set up some files, a couple of files in this subfolder called rmtemp, and I will just pick up this file called housing.csv, and you can see it's a comma separated file. So it's simply a file in which the different elements of the data are separated by commas. So if I hit next, you immediately see a basic structure of that file. So this is a file on housing, houses, their prices, and different attributes of the house like lot size, bedrooms, and so forth. Okay, so you have some summary information of the format of the data that you're inputting up on top that you're seeing, and we will not spend time on that. So if I click next, I am on my way to actually importing. I haven't yet imported the data. I'm well on my way to do that. The reason we have this intermediate step is that one can do a few operations during this intermediate step to help with processing down the road. For instance, you could identify any of the attributes. For instance, I click on lot size, and if I want to change the name of the column, I could do that. You can see I've used the drop down button. And then I can change the type. There are different types of data that RapidMiner uses. So if I might want to change an integer variable to a real data type and so forth. There are various kinds of operations that one can do, and I'm just showing you what some of those options might be. Okay, so if we scroll through to the right, we can see many of these attributes, and I just showed you how one might go about doing some operations on the column itself. Okay, So now if I click next, now our RapidMiner comes back and says, where do you want to store the data? So typically there are two types of files, the most common two types of files that you will have when you're working with RapidMiner. One is the raw data itself, like the one that you're about to import. The other type of file that you have is what are called process files that you will create in order to actually analyze the data. So the file that you were looking at just now was a data file. So I put it in the data folder. You could put it in the process folder also, but just to keep things cleanly separated, I would put this in the data folder itself. And I have kept the name of the file as what it was. You can change the file name if you wish. So when you hit finish, you have all these different attributes that will show up in the data set. And if you go back to design, so you can see the results of the import over here. Now the import is complete. So if I click on design, you can see back on the left hand side in the repository panel that the housing file is now stored in the data folder. So this is how you would actually import. Okay, and as I said, during the course of importation, you could do some simple types of processing, like changing the names of columns, changing the data types of columns, and so forth. Okay, so let me show you the second type of file that you would use, how you would save it after the course of processing. So let's say this housing file that you've just created, I want to use that housing file to predict the house price based on certain other features of the house. Okay, so never mind how this process is created. I just want to create a process to show you how, once you create the process, where would you store it, how would you store it, things like that. Okay, so I pull up this file called operator called retrieve housing. So I retrieve the housing data. Okay, and from it I will only pick out a few attributes that I will use for my regression. So there is an operator called select attributes. I will bring it up here. I connect the raw data to select attributes, and when I highlight this in the parameter section, I tell RapidMiner, hey, I want to pull out a subset of attributes for my regression, and in particular I pull out the number of bathrooms, the number of bedrooms, the lot size, the price, and the number of stories. Okay, and also I think this number of garage slots that I have, I've also pulling it out. So these are the attributes you see on the right hand side are what I have pulled out in order to do my regression. So then my next step, next operator, I will tell RapidMiner, hey, out of all those attributes, I want to identify price as my dependent variable. So there is another operator called set role. So I pull it up here and I feed it in, and I will tell RapidMiner I want to change the role of price to label. That's what RapidMiner calls a dependent variable. So now my raw data has been fed to the process, and I have identified the attributes that I want for the analysis, as well as which one is the dependent variable. Now I can actually go ahead and do the regression. So I need the regression operator. So I'll do linear regression. So I bring the operator up here, and I just feed the output from the set role operator to linear regression, and there's the results. So the diagram that you see before you is a process, and then this is typically what you do in RapidMiner. You import the data, and then you create a process that acts on the data and does your analysis for you. Obviously, this is a very simple process. You can have much more complicated processes, but if you run the process, you get your output of the regression. So I'm not going to spend time going over the results of the regression. That's not the objective of this video, but you have seen how you go about creating a process, and then at the end of it, obviously you want to save this process because you want to come back and use it later on with a revised data set and so forth. So if I go to File, Okay, and then I do save process as, and this time I will save it under the folder called processes and give it a name. So predict house price, let's say. Okay, once I do that, you can look on the left hand side in the repository panel that your process called predict house has been stored in the folder called processes. So now if I were to exit this, and so I have erased that process from the process dialog box that you see. Suppose I wanted to go back and reactivate that particular process, come back later at some point. All I have to do is double click on this process and the process comes back and I can rerun it and so forth. So when you create processes, you want to store them as well. So for your purposes, for purposes of this class, the two most common types of files that you'll be dealing with, one is the data file and the others are process files. And I've shown you how you would import a data file and save it somewhere on your repository, on your local disk, and how you would create a process and also save it in your local repository. Thank you for watching.